بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد. Welcome, brothers and sisters, to our fourth episode on the Marriage 101 Guidelines for Finding a Suitable Spouse podcast. In the previous episodes 1, 2, 3, we previously covered the topics, the first one, purpose and the importance of marriage. In the second episode, roles and responsibilities in marriage, meaning where do we derive these roles and responsibilities from as Muslims, and also how to prepare for marriage in a practical way. And in today's episode, inshallah ta'ala, what we will be delving into is a very important topic that there isn't much material out there in comparison to topics you hear about marriage, the rulings of marriage and the like, or even divorce and the rulings pertaining to divorce and marital discord and what are some of its causes. You tend to hear those topics often. However, the topic of questions you should ask a potential spouse isn't often discussed. And even if it is discussed, the type of things that are mentioned or encouraged to ask are in reality sometimes questions that may not even have any relevance to the day-to-day marriage life. And for example, years ago you would see brothers and sisters exchanging profiles and mentioning things like how much Quran they've memorized, right? Yes, memorizing the book of Allah is important and there's a great reward in it, etc. But then when you ask a brother and sister who've been married 5, 10, 15 years, how much Quran each of you have memorized actually played a role in your day-to-day life in marriage or marriage life, they may say close to none. The benefit though in that is that you can teach your children, and that in most cases someone who dedicated their life to memorizing the Quran, hopefully what is assumed or what is expected is that they're closer to Allah and their connection to Allah is stronger. However, what is more important than memorizing the book of Allah is acting upon it. And so questions that will actually tell you about a person's way of thinking, their likes and their dislikes, their expectations, what they think marriage is all about, and other questions, inshallah ta'ala, actually play a bigger role in what your marriage will be like if you were to marry, this particular person, than some things such as how much, Quran has someone memorized, or what degree do they hold, and, what were their marks in high school. And believe it or not, people ask questions like this. And so in today's episode, inshallah, I will be mentioning questions that are crucial to ask and consider before marrying, someone, a potential, someone you may be in a process of marriage with, in order to attain compatibility. And that is an important aspect of marriage, which actually plays a big role in how long a marriage will last. You find people who are practicing, within themselves, you can say close to Allah, praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, even praying Qiyam al-Layl and all of that, and then they end up divorced after 3 months. Why is that? And more often than not, when you discuss or you counsel couples, you'll find that a lot of the reasons for the divorce are things connected to before marriage, meaning either things that were hidden, things that were not asked, things that began to appear during marriage that the person did not know about the other person prior to marriage. And if you ask each one of them, the husband or wife, did you ask about this previously? And they say, well, I didn't think of asking that, or that didn't cross my mind. And so inshallah, this podcast and this episode will help brothers and sisters who are looking to get married navigate, this process in a more effective way, inshallah ta'ala, and will help them, ask things that they probably previously were not thinking about, aspects of marriage that they thought, may not be as important, or maybe even just never crossed their mind. And without further ado, we will begin, inshallah ta'ala, getting into the questions. Before we start though, what I've done is I've organized these questions into categories. So different aspects of marriage, in order to organize the questions in a better way. So inshallah ta'ala, the first category of questions will be questions that will tell you about someone's personality. And so why is that important? Well, it's important for an obvious reason, which is to see if you and this person will actually get along. If your personalities are very different, that most likely will lead to clashes. And sometimes people have the notion that, oh no, as long as we're religious, everything will be fine, which is not the case. That is a misconception. That just because someone is religious, that you will automatically get along with them. That is definitely not the case. And you find that even in people who are, practicing and religious, however, are not friends or do not like one another based on personality. Some people just don't mesh and they don't click. And that's just how it is. And that applies likewise to marriage. That applies likewise to marriage. So some of the things that one should consider when trying to find out about someone's personality is that you yourself actually first and foremost have to know your own personality. So it doesn't help you to ask another person about their personality only to, gather information about them. The point of asking is to see if you're compatible with this person. If that once you find out about their personality and you know your own, then you'll know whether you will get along with this person or not. So before you even ask, these questions, you must know your own personality. And before that, actually, before we even begin mentioning the questions, I'm going to give certain points that you must take into consideration and keep, in mind while you are asking these questions and getting the answers that you desire. Number one, when you are asking these questions, as we just finished mentioning, it is important that you know the answers you yourself are looking for. So don't just ask questions to ask questions. Don't just ask questions to then later say, oh, I asked him such and such and he said this. What does that mean? After you've gathered all the information about a brother, if it's a sister asking questions, she doesn't know what to do with that information. She has to go and ask others about it, which will not benefit her, because if it's her friends or family or whatever the case is, they're going to tell her based on how they view things or based on their own personality. So they won't be answering based on her personality, which sometimes is a harm, because she will either accept or reject, that potential brother based on someone else's views on things and not her own, and vice versa if it's a brother. That you must know the answers that you yourself are looking for before you even ask these questions, so that when you get these answers, you know right away whether this person is good for you or not. Or also whether these are some things that you can overlook and they're not that big of a deal, or they are deal breakers for you. You're able to make that decision on your own. And so it is important, number one, to know the answers that you are looking for, and to also know what you are seeking before even asking these questions, or else, like we said, you won't even know what to do with the answers. The second thing that you should note before asking these questions are, no matter what you do, never, ever settle if you see the answers you receive as being things that you have an issue with. So if before you met this person that you are now, considering for marriage, if there are things that you know about yourself that you cannot handle, there are things about yourself that you do not like, and no matter what happens, you won't like, there is no benefit in accepting, that person and settling for that person, only to be in a marriage where you'll be miserable and unhappy, right? If, however, you ask questions, you find out certain things about someone, but those things in and of themselves are not actually bad things, it's just your preference, then maybe you should, look at yourself and see if there's maybe things that you need to change about yourself, about your own personality, about your own habits. But if you're not able to, then it is more beneficial for you to seek someone that is compatible with you, meaning someone you do not have to change in order to fit what you like or to fit your personality or in order to get along with. That most of the time does not work, especially when people get older in age and they're more set in their ways. They're not as flexible as if they were younger and able to change their mind, as they grow. But when someone is older, they pretty much know what they want and they are a certain way already. So it is better for you and better for the success of a marriage to seek someone that is already the way you like, and not to settle for whatever reason, not to settle for someone because they may have this and this, but there's something critical about them that personally you would not get along with that individual. Don't settle only to get divorced a few months later and or to stay married but not happy in your marriage. And do not convince yourself that you're going to change this person and thus, overlook these things before marriage, because you will get into a marriage and be unhappy. And then you're going to regret it and end up resenting this person. And living with them in resentment. And that is not healthy for a marriage, especially if later on what ends up happening is you end up divorcing because of something you could have avoided from the get-go, right? It's better to be realistic before you even get into a marriage regarding these things, that you know what you like, you know what you don't like, and you stay away from what you don't like. Now, likewise, when you receive the answers to the questions that you're asking, don't be hasty in terms of making a decision right away. Meaning after one conversation, you hear everything you like and you say, yep, this is the one for me. This is my queen and this is my king, right? This is the person I've been waiting for my entire life, my knight in shining armor. No, take your time. Consider the questions that they've, answered. It may be that, you heard everything that you liked, but also with that, consult people you trust. Take it to people that know you very well, and this will see with you that this person is actually compatible for you and good for you, right? Likewise, pray istikhara. The next point is not to base your decision on emotions or attraction alone, meaning that the moment you laid eyes on this individual, you were attracted immediately, and now you forget everything, right? And you forget everything that they've said. Maybe everything that they've answered is completely opposite to what you're looking for, but because you're attracted to them, you want to overlook all of that. Don't make that mistake. Likewise, and which is probably one of the most popular reasons why people overlook things and try to convince themselves that they will somehow change this person, or that, as they say, will grow together, right? He's a work in progress, or she's a work in progress, or whatever the case is. All these things we try to tell ourselves to convince ourselves that this person is worthy, or this person is good for us and is compatible for us, or compatible with us, is desperation for marriage. Sisters, are getting older in age and haven't been able to find a suitable husband, and so now, brothers that they would have never considered previously, now they start considering. Now they start saying, well, there's no good brothers out there anyways, I might as well go for this one, or I might as well go for that one. And brothers likewise, something that they would never accept previously, they will now consider and say, well, there's not a lot of sisters out there, and my desires are high, and it's very difficult to lower my gaze, and this and that, and then I'll just marry anyone, the first one that appears in front of me. That may solve your problem in the the near future, right? But in the long run, that is not going to help you, because after you've now fulfilled your desires and all of that has happened, now you're living with that individual, and you did not take the time to consider all of these questions that you should have asked and what you needed to find out about this individual before you married them, so that the marriage can be a fruitful marriage, a good marriage that lasts. Another point to mention is, a lot of times what happens is, when people ask each other questions, they tend to tell one another what the other person wants to hear. And that, usually happens due to the desperation, especially when someone sees that they've come across someone that, may be good in certain areas and things like that, and they're now desperate for marriage. They'll start saying whatever the other person wants to hear in order to get married, in order for the other person to consider them for marriage and marry them. The problem with that is, likewise, like the other points we mentioned, that will be, very short lasted. After a couple of months, it'll be the two of you once again, and all of those things that, you were deceiving the other person with, and not being honest about, or not telling the full truth about, will end up coming out anyways. And then, there's the chance of divorce. So what I suggest and advise in this sort of time, and when you're asking questions, is not to mention too much about what you yourself are looking for. Rather to focus more on asking questions to keep the other person honest. What that means is, don't just mention everything that you're looking for and everything that you want in the future and all of that, and then start asking that individual questions. They now basically have an entire script of what you're looking for. All they have to do is read from that script, and then you're like, wow, mashallah, this is, the person that I've been dreaming about my entire life. When in reality, you gave them all the answers. So what you should do is ask about what you're looking for, and then you assess yourself whether this person is compatible with you based on the answers that they give you. That way, they don't know much about you yet, and you'll be able to see compatibility in a more honest way, in a more transparent way. Whereas if you were to already tell them everything about yourself, then they already have basically, the script to read from, and they tell you what you want to hear. And a way to avoid that also is, the old method where people would send each other emails, where, you have 10, 15, 20 questions that you ask the potential brother or sister that you're looking to marry, and that person has, all the, a whole day or whatever to answer, or even days to put together, the best kind of answer. Whereas if you were to ask them directly face to face, or if you were to ask them over the phone with the presence and the permission of a mahram, for the sisters, then you keep them honest. It is harder to make up something on the spot than when you give someone time to answer over the phone, like in terms of a text message or in terms of email. So what I advise or what I encourage is to make sure that these questions are done in person. So if a brother is, interested in a sister, that he goes to her house in the presence of her mahram or her family, and he asks these questions directly, or asks her father directly about these things, and he can speak with his daughter. But the problem with that sometimes is that a lot of fathers are not really involved in their daughters' lives and don't really know them like that, and so that makes it a bit difficult. But if there's the possibility where the brother can ask the sister at her home, whether the father is present or the older brother, whoever is her mahram and responsible for her, then that's the best way. And likewise for the sister, that she asks the brother the questions directly, meaning in a way where the other person doesn't have time to make up a formal answer that is prepared. The more authentic the answers are, meaning asked on the spot, the more accurate they're going to be, more often than not. So these are some of the points that one should consider before asking the questions. And then now here we go with the actual questions. So as I mentioned, I broke the sets of questions into categories. The first one being questions that that will tell you about someone's personality. And as we mentioned, why that's important is to see if the two of you are compatible. So for example, are they social and more extroverted, or are they introverted and more quiet? So if you yourself are a person that is extroverted, talkative, social, the life of the party, as they say, then you may prefer someone who is similar to you. In terms of conversations that you'll have between one another. Usually if someone is talkative and things like that, they also want someone who reciprocates that and is like them, so that they can keep, the relationship can be alive. And if they're with someone that is quiet and doesn't really talk much, then that can affect the relationship. And so it's good to know if the person is like that, and then you know yourself what you prefer. Likewise, you ask what are some of the things that angers them or annoys them or bothers them in terms of people, in terms of other people's personalities. Then when they answer, if you have those traits and those traits are, in you, then you know what that means in terms of your compatibility. You know what that means in terms of your compatibility. You ask them also what makes them happy. What are things that make them happy, whether they're physical things or otherwise, material things or otherwise. They could be gestures, they can be words, whatever the case is. What are things that make them happy? Likewise, things that can tell you about someone's personality or how they are in their current state are experiences that they may have had in the past, such as life traumas or emotional situations or things that they've gone through in the past that really affected their life and caused them to be a certain way today. And so it's good to ask people about these things, especially in these times where a lot of these mental issues or traumas that affect people emotionally have increased, and that's also connected to the distance from the deen. A lot of the times when the connection with Allah is either severed or is not really strong, these things are more often present. And so you ask a person about things that they've gone through. What you may find out is that you have similar life experiences that you can both relate to, which will help you in your marriage, meaning you will be actually compatible. Or you may be someone who actually was, alhamdulillah, blessed to not have went through any of that, and so you're a certain way. But the other person is someone who's like that and may need someone who has, the emotional intelligence or the ability to understand, even if they haven't gone through those things, but they can be what that other person needs in terms of, emotionally and care and things like that. And so asking that type of question helps in terms of you making the decision to know whether you're able to be in a relationship with someone like that or not. You also ask them, what do they do for fun or for entertainment? Some people like to go to the movies, right? If you're a practicing person, you don't want anything to do with that. Some people like to go hiking, take walks, depending on where you live, in the forest or this and that, on a trail or something like that. That may be something you do. And so, that can be a way of bonding between a husband and wife. And so some of these things are important to ask about. What are their friends like? What are the type of people that they keep, as companions? Usually someone will be just like their companion in terms of personality, in terms of their likes, in terms of their dislikes. Otherwise, why are they friends anyways? Something unites them and brings them together. And so ask them about their friends. What are some of the things they do? And ask them about them in general. You don't have to ask them about their entire lives, but try to find out what kind of friends that this individual keeps, so that tells you about the kind of people that they're around, which will also help you, number one, tell you about that individual, because they will most likely be like their friends. And likewise, later on, you'll have children. And this is an important point, because your children will go and be around your spouse's friends usually. And so do you want your children around those type of people or not? That is something you have to ask yourself. So it's important then to ask about their friends and the kind of people that are around them. Ask them also about how do they behave when they're upset. So some people are different. Some people cry. Some people lock themselves in a room and don't come out. Some people break the dishes and everything in the house. People are different. How do they behave when they're upset? What this will tell you is what you may or may not able to handle, or what you may or may not be able to handle. For example, breaking dishes and breaking everything in the house. Pretty much nobody is able to deal with that. So if that's how someone is, then you stay away from them. Likewise, if someone is, the type that stays quiet and, doesn't speak when they're upset, then you can, if that's something that annoys you and bothers you and you don't like that about people, then that, can be an indicator that you can move on and not consider this individual. Or that can make you ask further questions like, okay, if you are someone who goes, quiet and locks yourself in a room, then how does your spouse get you to, be happy again and get you out of that state? What are some things that you need in that moment? And then you see what they say. If you're able to do that and you have the ability to do that and you know that about yourself, then you can consider this person. But if you know that what they require is something that may be a burden to you or something that you don't want to have to do all the time, then there's no point of forcing yourself to marry someone like that, and you just simply move on. Also ask them about their habits, whether they are good or whether they are bad. Some people may have a habit of being very clean and organized. That's something good to have, right? And the opposite also. Someone may be messy and not really care about being organized and the like. So that'll tell you about the kind of person you're going to live with. And you'd be surprised, because people actually divorce for some of the most, the most minor things sometimes, such as some of these things, like this person is messy and I can't live with them, I can't deal with them, I want a divorce. You'd be surprised. Things like that actually play a huge role in terms of the friction that it causes between husband and wife, because one person may be used to a certain way of living and the other isn't, or the other was not really, no one really made sure that they did that. And so when that, becomes apparent in a marriage, one person, one spouse, the one who's organized, will not be able to handle the one who isn't, organized and is messy and things like that. And so that can actually, believe it or not, lead to a divorce. And that happens. That happens. Another important personality question is also to ask the potential person that you're considering for marriage about personality traits that you yourself have, the things that you yourself know about yourself, and ask them what they think about those personality traits. Because that will tell you that either this person doesn't like your personality type or actually does like your personality type. The second set of questions that you ask, this one is very broad, so a lot of different things come into it, so we're not going to really delve into a lot of actual examples, but just in general, questions that will tell you about someone's mentality. Meaning, and how do you find that? You ask them about different scenarios. You ask them about different issues that are happening around the world. You ask them about different scenarios, or let's say, for example, something that will bring out their mentality. You'll find out if this is a pessimistic person. You'll find out if this is an optimistic person. Like, for example, how do you see if you were to become sick, terminally ill with something? How would you deal with that? Meaning a calamity. Scenarios or circumstances where you have to now deal with a calamity or money issues or whatever. If you see the person answering questions in a more optimistic way, and they're very positive in their outlook on things, then that tells you that this is an individual that if you were to be married to them, then they'll be patient, that they have a positive outlook on things, and they have hope for khair even after hardship. But if someone is always talking about matters from the negative, from a negative angle and a very pessimistic angle, and they view the world in a very negative way and only focus on the problems and the negatives and the hardships, then that tells you that this is someone who doesn't have much tolerance, doesn't have much patience, and may have a quick fuse. And instead of focusing on solutions, they rather focus more on either blame or trying to find where the fault is, instead of actually trying to find a way to make things better. And so that will tell you about a person's mentality and a person's view on things. And that plays a big role in compatibility between spouses. The third set of questions are questions that will tell you about the other person's family and their family dynamic. Meaning, what type of household did this person come from? So, for example, one thing that can tell you a little bit about someone is, and you have to actually, go deeper. It's not just the first question, but are their parents together or are they divorced? So did they grow up in a household where both parents were present, loving one another, not a broken home? Usually, and not every single case, but usually when people are from a broken home, then there are certain things that come with that, in terms of their personality, in terms of their mentality, in terms of how they also now want to live their life in their marriage life. The experiences that they had will form those things. And so that is what you are seeking to know when you ask if their parents are together and if they are, or are they divorced. And if they are together, then you ask them, what is their relationship like? So, for example, if their parents are divorced and they live with their mother, then what is their relationship with their father? Is he still in their life? Do they still have a good relationship, etc.? And if it's that they live with their their father, then you ask them, what is their relationship with their mother? Is she still in their life? Is their relationship good, etc.? This helps you in more than one way. Number one, regarding yourself and the person that you're going to marry. How has, this dynamic affected their mentality and their emotions and things like that? So you will ask further questions about that to see, how they feel about marriage, or what do they think about marriage, or what should a marriage look like? Because a lot of times when you're a child growing up in a two-parent household where the father is present and the mother is present and both are loving and caring parents, usually that causes the children to develop, in a complete way, and not really have the emotional scars and things like that other children may have due to divorce and the damages that that divorce does to children. So you find out about those things with questions that you ask after the first set of questions, and afterwards, what it also does is, due to that family dynamic, you will also know, do you want to have children later on that will have aunts and uncles from this family, grandparents from this family? Is this a family that you want your future children to be a part of? Some of the things that they do, or some of the things that they, just the way their family is. For example, your children will grow up eventually knowing that they should have two grandparents. And now, let's say your parents are together and in your life, so they will have two sets of grandparents on that side, but the other side may be a broken family, and they start asking questions, and that will affect the children. So you think about, two aspects for the most part, you and how you will be dealing and interacting with whether it's a brother, the sister's family, or whether it's a sister, the brother's family. And then later on, after that, your children and what that means for your children. And if, either the brother that you are seeking to marry, or if it's the sister that you are seeking to marry, if their parents happen to be divorced, right, and may have been divorced when they were, at a young age, you ask them how that has affected them in terms of emotions, or also if that has affected their view on marriage and how they think marriage should be. Because what helps a child have a proper focus on marriage and how marriages should be, right, is that they see a healthy marriage growing up, that they're in a household, where two parents are dealing with one another with respect and love and affection and mercy. And if they don't see that growing up, then where do they get that from? In most cases, either they will not know, even if they're not harmed by it, emotionally and mentally. A lot of times they'll just be ignorant. So for the brother side, for example, if he didn't have a father in his life to see, how a woman should be treated and how a woman should be respected and honored, as a wife, then he may not know that, especially if he doesn't have a relationship with his father. Or he may have seen negativity from his father towards his mother, and that may have formed now how he sees marriage. And likewise, the opposite. If he saw his mother a certain way, if she was a good woman, etc., then that's the type of woman that he'll seek. And if his mother wasn't, then he may even settle or even seek a woman like that. So when someone is young and that's what they see, that is what forms what they deem to be normal. That forms their standard. Unless, by the mercy of Allah, they're either taught by someone else or an elder or a teacher or whatever else, they learn it some other way. But if they don't have anyone to teach them, then usually there's some negative effects of divorce. And so it's best to ask people, if that is the family dynamic, that they are asked about these things, that they are asked, so that you can get to the bottom of how they see things and how they feel about marriage and certain aspects of marriage, etc. Also, for sisters, when you are seeking a brother in marriage, it is important to know how he views women and how he, in terms of his respect for women and honor for women and things like that. And one of the things that will help you realize that is his relationship with his sisters. If he has sisters. If a brother has sisters, whether older than him or younger than him, what is his relationship with his sisters? Right? How does he view his sisters? Do they have a relationship? Do they not have any relationship at all? Right? It is important to ask him about his relationship with his sisters, and likewise to ask his sisters about him. how do his sisters view him? A lot of the times you'll find families where the sisters may have been abused by the older brother or whatever the case is, and so they hate his guts. So that'll tell you about the type of man he is, where he, as a big brother, he should be protecting his sisters and loving them and being an example for them for what a man should be like, so that they don't make a mistake and marry just anybody. That he be their standard, and they don't settle for anything, less than that, or better than him, but definitely not less than that. And so it is important to know that. And so usually if the brother and this, he has a good relationship with his sisters and they love him and they respect him and all of that, then usually, he knows how to treat a woman and all of that. And he knows, the status of a woman and all of that. And vice versa. When it comes to a brother seeking a sister, then he asks her about her relationship with her brothers, if she has any. And also asking her brothers their relationship with her, if she was a sister that listened and respectful and all of that, and they have good to say about their sister, then inshallah that'll work in your favor as a brother. The fourth set of questions are questions that will tell you about someone's philosophy in terms of raising children, and which is a huge, part of marriage. And so one of the important questions, for example, the brother is the one asking questions, is that you ask a sister, what is her role in terms of a mother and raising children? As the mother is the nurturer and the asl in terms of raising children. What does she deem her role to be? Does she believe in sending her children to daycare and the daycare raising her children? Does she believe having a maid is necessary, and so the maid will raise the children, or the nanny, while she goes and focuses on her career, right? And reaching her career goals? These are things that are vital to know before marriage. Likewise, does she believe in, or even he'd believe in, the television raising the children? Because that is the society that we live in today. Most children are raised by television or tablets or iPads or smartphones, and parents have little to no role in raising their children, in fact. And you find children acting, behaving, mimicking television characters and cartoon characters more than their own parents, which shows a neglect on the parent side. So, for example, boys, if the father is involved in the boys' lives, then and is constant in their life, spending time with them and playing with them and taking them out and all of that, then he'll be the person that they see the most, and they'll try to mimic him and behave like him and speak like him and dress like him and everything. But if they're put in front of a television all day and an iPad all day and a smartphone all day on YouTube, then you'll see them talking like those cartoon characters and behaving like them and acting like them. And those TV characters will be who they actually behave like and mimic, and not the parents, which means these gadgets are actually in reality what are raising your children and not yourself. Likewise, something that actually comes up a lot in marriages, and is a very specific point to mention when it comes to raising children, is more specific regarding daughters, and that is sisters who may themselves be practicing and fully covered and everything according to the legislation. However, the way they dress their daughters is inappropriate, and they believe that's fine because they're just little girls, right? Dressing them in swimwear and taking them to public pools with men and boys there from the ages 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and thinking that this is perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And so then, as a brother and a husband and a father, that shouldn't be something that you see as appropriate or should be okay with. So this is something that you should uh, as a protector of your daughter, to allow her to be in public with all kinds of evil type of individuals out there in public. And who knows today with smartphones and all these things, what kind of perverts are out there, and it may take pictures of your child and record your child in that state. And a lot of times we find, and this is sad to say, but a lot of sisters are neglectful of this thing and are very naive to think that there aren't people that are that evil out there. And why be that naive when we hear and see stories of this all the time, right? So there are evil people like that, especially in the West, all kinds of evil people like that. And you are not getting any type of reward by dressing your daughter in that manner. You are not making her happy. A child that's 4, 5, 6 years old is happy with what you teach them, is happy with what you put on them, right? If your daughter, before she even reaches the age of distinction and understanding right from wrong, if you make her used to hijab and covering and modesty and haya, that is how she'll be. And chastity, that is how she'll be. If you get her used to short skirts and short dresses and revealing herself, and you think you're going to put on a hijab for her at the age of 12, 13, 14, then you're sadly mistaken. It'll almost be impossible to do so, especially in the times that we're living today. So don't get your daughters used to a certain way of dress and a certain way of, behavior, thinking when they're young, making the excuse that, they're just, little girls, they don't know any better. It's not about that. It's about protecting your child. You're responsible for that child. If they are harmed in any way, you will be held accountable for that. So, that is just a general advice for mothers regarding their daughters, but also for brothers to ask about these things before marrying a sister, to see her view on these type of things so that you don't have to deal with it later on. That you should be in agreement with your future wife that this is how we will raise our daughters, and this is how we'll dress our daughters, and this is what we will make our daughters, used to, and dressed in this certain way. And inshallah ta'ala, there won't be any issues with that. Also, what comes under that is also asking, your potential wife when you believe you should get your daughters used to hijab. She going to say when she reaches the age of puberty, or before the age of distinction, when she doesn't know any better, but whatever you teach her at that age is what she'll be used to and what she'll end up loving. And so that is very, very important. That is very, very important, to get your daughters used to that type of dress, and also get her used to sisters. So for example, the wife that your friends are sisters that practice and cover in public, so that your daughters are used to women who cover and not used to women who reveal themselves. That is very important. Likewise, ask her about boys and how they should be raised. A lot of problems that we find are boys that are enabled when they're young, not given any type of responsibility. Every time they do something wrong, the mother is there defending them and say, let him do it. He's just a boy. He's just a kid. Let him do this and let him do that. And the authority of the father is pretty much absent, because anytime he tries to set rules down or lay down rules for a boy and discipline him, the mother is there violating that. And so what that creates is a boy who knows he can get away with everything and has no responsibility and is always being catered to and enabled. So when they do something wrong, he's never punished. And a lot of times now, when you see boys in schools who misbehave and have an issue with authority, meaning in the classroom, the teacher is the authority, but boys who misbehave and don't listen to teachers and argue back with the teachers and talk back to the teachers, and you find them sitting in the hallway often or in the principal's office. This is a lot of the times where it comes from. It comes from the home. He's in a home where there are no rules, and the one who is in authority is always being violated and is always being talked back to by the mother, right? And so this is learned behavior from the boy or even from the girls at times. So it doesn't help your child that you do that. Rather, the husband and wife should be on the same page in how they discipline their children and what they allow them to do and what they don't allow them to do. And if there are certain privileges that, like playtime or whatever the case is, that there's a time for that, and they agree also on that when they allow them to do that, and when it's time to, for example, to do homework and things like that, that the parents should be on the same page, and one should not be violating the other's authority in front of the children. That only causes problems for that child in terms of their behavior, in terms of their discipline. Likewise, ask about things such as music, meaning cartoons with music, toys with music, and all of that. Because today it's very hard to avoid or find toys that don't have those things. But it's important to be on the same page with your spouse to avoid those types of toys, so that the child does not get used to music and all of that. Rather, they should know from a young age that music is haram and music is evil, etc. Also, in terms of tarbiyah, raising children, discuss the matter of when, with your potential spouse, when boys, for example, should now no longer mix with women and, his mother's friends and things like that, or other families, daughters, etc. At a certain age, you have to get your boys used to only mixing with the men and being with the men, etc. And likewise, the opposite for the daughters, that, when she's very young, there's no real issue being around, for example, the father's husbands and things like that, non-mahram men. But when she gets to a certain age, that she should no longer mix with men or mix with boys. Not that at that age it's haram for them, but you have to teach your children these things early so that it becomes easy for them when it does become haram for them. So don't neglect that matter in the beginning when they're young, and then later on when they actually reach the age of puberty, now you tell your 12-year-old, 13-year-old son, you can no longer sit with sister so-and-so and talk to sister so-and-so, and she now has to wear hijab, and that becomes like a shock to him, right? These things that will become haram for your child once they reach the age of puberty, it is incumbent to teach them before it becomes haram, so that they can get used to it. And the transition, so there is no transition at that time where they have to completely change their lives, afterwards. So as a parent, you have to think about that and have mercy upon your child and teach them these things then, so that they don't become a burden and a difficulty for them afterwards. The fifth set of questions, which is also very, very crucial, is questions that will tell you about someone's beliefs as it pertains to their religion. So general questions about belief to figure out the person's aqeedah and manhaj. These are very important, because if you're a husband, this wife is the one that is going to be teaching your children. So you don't want your wife to be a kharijiyya or a sufiyya or whatever the case is, because that is what she'll teach your children. And likewise for a sister, for the authority in your household, and the male figure, the leader of the household, to be of a particular sect, a deviant sect, and then that's what your children are now learning, is a huge problem. And so you have to, as the ulama mentioned, that the greatest right of your children before you even have them is who you choose as a spouse. For sisters, who you choose as your husband, and for husbands, who you choose as their mother. And there is nothing more important than this point here, the matter of deen and belief, what the person believes as their aqeedah and as their methodology. No. Likewise, you ask them about people they take their knowledge from. Who is it that they take their knowledge from in this time, this time and day? And what's important is that, because someone may take knowledge from a particular speaker in today's time, but may be ignorant. They may not know that this person is they should not be listened to. So what's important to note regarding this person that you're considering for marriage is, let's say they may be taken from someone who is not, supposed to be taken from, and you know that. Are they willing to take advice? Are they willing to look at proof that you may show them and say, oh yeah, you're actually right. I'm now going to, stay away from this individual and no longer listen to them. And they'll listen to, a better alternative in terms of speakers and who they take their knowledge from in terms of deen. Or do they have fanaticism towards particular speakers, and no matter what you tell them, they're not going to listen? That type of person you should stay away from. So you don't necessarily have to rule out someone who may be taken from someone who should not be taken from, but you give them the opportunity. Once they tell you, I take from this person, that person, that person, and I benefit from their classes and their lectures. If you know those people to have issues, whether you're the brother or the sister, and you give sincere advice with clear-cut evidences, if that person is willing to listen and doesn't have any, biased partisanship, any type of hizbiyah towards that person, or blind love towards a particular group or organization or masjid or speaker, that is what is required. That they're open, for the truth. But if someone is, I don't want to hear anything you have to say, this is all I will, basically I live and die by these people, that is not who you want to marry. That is not who you want to marry. Also, another set of questions, which is the general, without any real actual examples, is to ask scenario-specific questions, meaning questions about particular scenarios that occur in marriage generally. You hear about certain things that happen in marriage and things like that. You ask the other individual, how would they behave in this situation? How would they act in this situation? What do they think is right in this situation? How should they do this and how should they do that? And then and these questions are circumstantial, meaning a scenario. So you present a scenario to them, and then you see how they would navigate and behave in that scenario. Once you find that the person, pretty much answered the question in a way that you deem correct, then that is good. And then if you see that they completely missed the mark, then that also tells you what you need to know about that person. Now there are a set of questions that brothers should ask sisters before marriage, and then likewise sisters should ask brothers before marriage. So for brothers, questions about particular manifestations of feminism, to see what a sister feels about it without actually mentioning the word feminism. So you knowing about what feminism pushes and the agenda that feminism pushes and how they've corrupted sisters and what they've actually glorified to them to make them believe that this is the way forward and this is the path to happiness and the path to justice and rights for women, and etc., etc. These specific aspects, these points that feminists or the feminist movement delve upon and they focus on, ask a sister about these points, such as having a career. Not to say that a woman working and things like that is not allowed, it should not happen, but what is her view on it? Does she prioritize that more than anything? Is that more important to her than marriage itself and children and raising her children and all of that? Does she see that as, this is my priority and I'm going to wait to have children in 5 to 10 years? Then that tells you what you need to know about someone, especially if you're someone who wants to have children in the near future, etc., etc. So ask about particular aspects of feminism or points that feminists push, to sisters or to women in general, and see how she views those things. If she's an advocate for them, if she's one who's on that, then it tells you that this is someone who is, severely affected by the feminist movement. And if she's against it and she has a balanced position when it comes to these things, and she derives her views when it comes to women's rights and the role of a woman and what it means to be a mother and what it means to be a wife, she derives her views and her outlook on those things from Islam, then that is who you should consider. But if a sister, believes that there's some sort of happiness out there for her other than in Islam, then that is a problem. Likewise, a topic that is always, considered and or talked about, discussed all over social media and very popular, especially in these times, is the matter of dowry and the mahar and 50k mahars. And if her brother isn't bringing forth 25k or 50k, then I don't even want to hear about it. Or if her brother doesn't have this or doesn't have that, I don't even want to, he's not worthy, right? These arguments. And likewise, the wedding, the type of wedding hall that is going to be rented, the catered food, the type of dress or dresses, how many different outfits that she's going to change into on that day, and all of these things. You as a brother have to consider what you yourself want, for your marriage. The day that you unite with your wife, is it a day that is going to be filled with mixing, dancing, DJs, tabarruj, women, exposing themselves and their beauty and posting themselves all over the social media? Is that how you want your marriage, to your unity to begin? And that you expect with that a night of disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that your marriage is actually going to last and be, a blessed marriage? In more cases than not, marriages that begin in that manner are marriages that end in divorce. And there's a reason for that, because Allah does not put barakah in disobedience. Allah does not bless things that, were based on haram. So you see that. Just look at all the people that you may know in your city and things like that. Oh, so-and-so's wedding was amazing. MashaAllah, we had a good time and everything. It was basically a nightclub. And then a few months down the road, oh yeah, so-and-so, they're not even married anymore. And you wonder why. So you as a brother, who's the one who's going to be expected to pay for all of these things, that is something you have to consider. And you won't know until you discuss this. And I advise any brother, if you're considering a sister who wants a wedding like that, you won't even need to ask about anything else, if that's what she prioritizes. Because the problem nowadays is that sisters actually don't want marriage, but what they want is a wedding. And all the emphasis is put on a wedding, and that one day, that one night, actually not even one day, but the makeup that goes into it, the hair styling that goes into it, the dresses that are bought, the jewelry that's bought, the gold, the hall that has to be rented, the type of food, everything that goes into it. Not a fraction of that effort goes into the actual marriage. And so it doesn't surprise us then that a lot of those marriages end, right? They don't last long. And so it's a problem when a sister cares more about the wedding and having fun with her girls on that day than the actual unity and the journey that she's going to embark upon with this man now, who is her husband and is going to be the leader of her household. And that we discussed a lot more in the first episode, where we discussed the outlook on a lot of people nowadays when it comes to marriage, just like the kuffar. And this is something that we've taken, from the Christians, where the preparations for the wedding ceremony are, they occur for months. But the actual work that has to go into the actual marriage and living with this other individual now is almost not even talked about. Meaning a lot of these questions that we mentioned today, probably a lot of people don't even ask these questions or even think about them. They think that everything is based on love and we love one another and nothing can stop us, nothing can come between us, just like the movies. It's Hollywood all over again. And then the reality happens, just like Hollywood, where you don't find many celebrities and all these people sticking together for a long time, because it's all about the wedding and, posting everything on social media for the world to see and for the world to envy and be jealous of and showing it off and all of that. And then in the end, the two individuals are miserable and they end up divorcing. So is the sister one that is more focused on a wedding, an expensive wedding, expensive dresses, gold, a high mahar, and you as a brother Yes, a woman has the right to ask for the mahar that she wants, but you as a brother have the right to also refuse. Nobody asks you to agree to a mahar and then you later on complain about it. And on the point of dowries and mahars, one point regarding the parents who actually encourage this and are behind their daughters, or even sometimes pushing their daughters to ask for high mahars. You have to ask yourself in reality, like, is your daughter a product that you're trying to sell? Because a lot of parents have this mentality that, and it's usually to show off to others and to show a face to others, that if she were to ask for a low mahar, people are going to say, oh, she's cheap. Oh, she's probably not even a virgin. That's why they settled for this. And these are the wasawis, these are the whispers of shaitan that comes to mothers usually and aunties and all these things. And so they think that there's some sort of sharaf and nobility in asking for such a high mahar. So they brag to others about, oh, that's so and so that got 25k as a mahar. Oh, that means she's expensive. That means she's worthy and all of that. This is all backward thinking and no basis in Islam. And it shows actually insecurity in people. And in reality, you're selling your daughter. You believe your daughter is worth 25k, 50k, 100k even. You put a price on your daughter thinking that is what she's worth. That is actually selling your daughter cheap. That is actually, in reality, selling your daughter cheap. In reality, your daughter should have no price. There shouldn't be a price for your daughter. But because of greed or because of wanting to please others, and wanting to show off to others and make sure you can deflect, all the rumors and what people are going to say about your daughter if she asks for a balanced amount or a moderate mahar, you go and do this and make her life difficult as well as her husband's. And first and foremost, her husband's. Because what happens sometimes is, in order to pay that amount, sometimes brothers go into debt or take loans or go into, for example, like in the Somali community, what is called hegbed, meaning when a group of people put money together and every month one individual takes it, and now he has to pay that amount back for a year. All of this happens only to please other people, right? That 25k is going to go 20k, 15k, 30k, 50k, whatever it is. All that money spent on a haul, all that money spent on food that's wasted, all of that is going to be gone in a night, in one night, in a few hours. And then they have to still figure out how they're going to furnish their home, how they're going to buy a car, how they're going to prepare for children, how they're going to pay rent, and all of that. So especially in the time that we live today, where the people who can afford these types of weddings and all of that are not the average Joe. These are people who are well off, and the percentage of people like that are not the majority. They're the high minority. They are the ones that can afford these things. So where is this idea coming from? And so the harms that causes for marriages, what that does also to the psyche of a husband, when he has to cough up all these thousands of dollars and then later on only to be married to a woman who talks back to him and makes his life difficult and is not obedient and not submissive, and everything is on her time. And if you request something, you have hands of your own, you have legs of your own, go ahead and do it yourself. What that causes when a brother was made to pay all of that is for him to immediately resent his wife. Because when you make someone pay, when you make your daughter a business transaction and you made her worth 50k, you put in that man's mind now that he paid for a product. And he believes, just like you buy anything, you buy a nice car, you pay 50k for a car, and if that car doesn't work, you're not happy, right? When you make the issue of mahar as if it's business, that also has an effect psychologically on the man in terms of how he will deal with your daughter now. And so parents who do this, you are actually harming your daughter. You are harming your daughter, because what is going to happen is any mistake she makes in marriage, even if it's from the most minor of mistakes, this man is always going to believe that he was cheated, basically, or that he didn't get his money's worth because you chose to make it a business transaction. So now, anytime she does one little thing or she forgets one little thing, he's now thinking, man, I paid for this. I paid this amount for this. This is what I'm getting out of marriage. And the way he now, the respect he loses for his wife, wanting to even do anything for her, how he ends up talking to her, right? All of these things will have an effect, and in the end, it leads to divorce. So this is what happens. Whereas the opposite, if a family makes things easy, where they don't make them spend lavishly on a wedding and on a mahar and all of that, but rather if a brother saves that amount of money, they let them use it to build their home, to pay for couches and whatever house needs in terms of furnishing, and they use that money in that which benefits them, and they have something moderate in terms of a walima, or the wedding and all of that. They do something moderate that Allah inshallah ta'ala will put barakah in, with no music and no free mixing and all of that. And when that happens, when the family makes things easy on a husband, then the mercy that he has for that woman, that she made it easy for him, it'll be easier for him to now overlook mistakes of hers. And if she makes mistakes, he's gonna always remember that this is the woman that made things easy for me. Her and her family made things easy for me, and that is going to cause him to now to respect her and honor her. It'll make it easier. This is psychological. And this is something you have to think about as a father if you're giving your daughter away, and as your mother, as the mother of a daughter, and not to worry about what other people say. Especially, I know this from my community. All we do when it comes to weddings is worry about what this woman is going to say and that woman is going to say. The same people that are at the wedding slandering you, regardless of what you do. Oh, do you see what she's wearing? Oh, do you see her makeup? Oh, do you see her hair, how ugly she looks? You think you're pleasing people? You can do the greatest wedding. You make it a $50 million wedding, and you'll still find people who will criticize you. So what is the point of trying to please people? And in the end, the only people who are left with the burden of all of this is the husband and the wife. No one else deals with their burden and their hardships now after that. The burden, the hardships that come afterwards, after that wedding, and after that, that high mahar and everything, and what they have to go through afterwards. No one is there to help them afterwards. Not the mother, not the father, not anybody. And so, don't lead, as parents, don't lead your children to destruction. Don't lead them into destruction and into failed marriages before they even begin. Another question you ask, if you're a brother, is expectations in terms of living standards, based on what she's used to. And so then you'll know whether you're able to do that based on what you make, where you work, and all of that, insha'Allah ta'ala. Also, you ask her about her thoughts on her relationship with her in-laws, meaning your family. How does she view your mother, and what her relationship should be with your mother and with your father and the like, and with your sisters, etc. How close should she be with them, and how distant should be with is she now, because what happens is the idea of how the relationship with in-laws a lot of the times comes from culture. And so if two people are from different cultures, then there may be differences when it comes to that. So these things are important to talk about before marriage. Also ask her, because nowadays we know that divorce has skyrocketed, and it's all around us. What she thinks some of the causes of divorce are nowadays. Is it all about the men? Are the men the one causing all the divorce? And what her views are on that. Ask her about her views on obedience to a husband. What entails obedience to a husband? Is it conditional, for example? Does she believe that I'll obey him if he does such and such? Is that her view when it comes to obedience? Likewise, freedom. So a lot of sisters talk about freedom nowadays. What does it mean to be free in her eyes? What does it mean to be as a wife? As a wife who is, her leader is her husband. What does she deem freedom to be? Also, what is her role in terms of a wife? Does she know her role in terms of Islam, within the boundaries of Islam? Is Does she know her husband's rights? You ask her specifically, what are the rights of a husband, etc. Also, femininity, being feminine. What does she think that means? Being submissive and obedience towards the husband. Are these things innate, meaning Allah created the woman like that? Or are these things, does she believe that I'm only going to be like that for the right man? It's conditional. It's conditional. She's going to be feminine. And if it's not the right man, then she's going to be like a man, right? Masculine and aggressive and talking back and fighting back and challenging and all of that. But if he's the right man, quote unquote, then I'll be, submissive and I'll be feminine and all of that. Meaning you can turn it off and turn it on whenever you feel like. Does she believe that that's the case? Just like for a man. If a man were to use that same argument or have that same mentality, then okay, my masculinity in terms of protecting you and providing for you and all of that, well, it's for the right woman. And if she's the right woman, then I'll provide for her and all of that. But if she's not, then I won't provide for her and I won't do this and I won't do that. I'll be feminine, right? As a man, I'll behave like a woman. Does that work? It doesn't work when it's for a man. It doesn't work. But for some reason, some sisters believe that works for a woman, to turn off her femininity and her submissiveness and only turn it on for the right man. And in reality, that comes from a deeply rooted issue. And usually you hear this from sisters that have tried many men and been harmed, burned by them. And so now they have this attitude built up, this wall that they've built up. And when I mean tried different men, I don't mean slept with different men. What I mean is had, relationships, even if it's dating or talking, which is not, not permissible, whatever the case is, but went through many situations like that, and then now only have had bad experiences. And that is what leads them to say things like this that don't make any sense. Ask her what she knows about the nature of men and how they think in comparison to women. And why this point is important is because a lot of the conflict that occurs, marital discord that occurs in marriage is that whether it's a brother or a sister, all of them, when you tell them, are men and women the same in how they think and how they're created, they'll tell you no. However, when they're dealing with one another, they have expectations of the other spouse based on their own nature. Meaning, a wife will expect from her husband to think and feel what she feels without her having to mention to him, thinking that he automatically should know this, when it's not possible for him to know because he's not a woman. There are certain things that are like that, meaning certain things that are based on the nature of a woman. And likewise, certain things that are based on the nature of a man. A woman sometimes cannot understand why a man would make a certain decision or why he thinks like this or whatever the case is, because she's simply just not a man. And so what should happen is that you should always deal with the other person when it comes to matters of nature based on how they are and not rule on them. For example, a woman may have an idea of what love is for her. Certain gestures, certain things, when you remember to, buy her something that she didn't ask for, or when you hold a door open for her, when you hold her hand when she didn't ask you to. Things like this that if a man were to do without her asking, means a lot to a woman. A man won't even think about it most of the time. So sometimes a wife will say, well, I, want these types of things from you. Why don't you want them from me? Why don't you seek it? Do you not love me as much? And right away she goes to that. Instead of realizing that, no, you love in a certain way, or you, see certain acts and certain gestures as love, whereas a man sees other things such as obedience and respect and honor and knowing his status and all of these things, and dealing with him based on his status that he has, and acknowledging his authority in the household and all of that. He sees that as love. Whereas the woman may necessarily not see that as love, because the authority is with the husband. And so the husband likewise, when he's talking to his wife about something specific, and she answers in an emotional way or based of emotion, and he can answer, he can understand that, oh, this doesn't make sense, and being dismissive, and he's struggling to understand how he's been dismissed and how he's this and how he's that, because he's thinking as a man and wants to understand her with the nature of a man, which doesn't work. And this causes a lot of marital discord a lot of the time. And so that's important to ask a brother, to ask a sister, what does she know about the nature of man and the differences between the men and the male and female psyche. Also ask her about materialism, meaning gifts and all of these things, although they are very important in marriage, that husband and wife buy each other gifts and things like that. But what role does it play? Is it, for example, if you're not buying me this and this and that, then you're not worthy? That type of mentality, or yani, in moderation. When one has it, then they do it, and if they don't have it, then you remain patient. Also, very vital is you ask a sister, what is the purpose of marriage? What does she deem the purpose of marriage to be? Does she know what the purpose of marriage is in terms of Islam? And you see, with that, you'll know if she's even ready for marriage or not. Also, you ask, what do men want in a woman? What is it that a man wants in a woman in terms of, a relationship, in terms of marriage? What is it that a man wants in a woman? And also something that's very important, especially for those living in the West, is the matter of hijrah. Obviously, it goes back to ability and all of that, but as a important thing to talk about, because a lot of times we find brothers and sisters just getting married wherever they are in the West with no plans for hijrah, none of that. And then sometime down the road, they now want to make hijrah all of a sudden and have to make decisions in their life. And now it affects the other person because this was something that was never discussed before. Maybe the sister wants to stay with her parents. Maybe this and that. So all these other scenarios can come up. It's better to discuss these things beforehand, even where you would consider to live. Some sisters may, consider certain countries, but not others. And so it's important to discuss these things beforehand and not just come up with these things as, your marriage goes. Now for the sisters, in terms of the questions that they ask the brother, what does he think of the purpose of marriage is? You'll know whether he's ready for marriage or not. What does he think his role is as a husband? So meaning his role towards his wife and his duties towards his wife. And likewise, as a father, his duties towards his parents, his children. Is it simply to provide? So as long as he's working and putting, food in their mouth and clothes on their back, that's it. The rest of it, in terms of nurturing and playing with them and educating them and helping them with their homework and taking them out to play at the park, that's all the mother's job. Is that how he thinks? That is something to know before marriage. Also ask him, what is his idea of a healthy marriage and relationship? His ideal marriage, what does it look like? Likewise, you ask him, similar to what he would ask you, his views on his relationship with his in-laws, so your family, his relationship with your father, his relationship with your mother, and so on. And you ask him about the rights of his wife, so the rights of women in marriage, and see if he knows those rights. Does he believe that, providing and sheltering and clothing and feeding and all of these things are his responsibility solely, 100%? Or does he believe in 50-50? Does he believe in that, or does he believe in this? Also ask him, like he would ask you, about the nature of women and how they think and all of that, and how they differ from men, and see if he has that knowledge. Also ask him about future plans, where he plans to, where he plans to bring his family, where he plans to house them, and even if it comes to hijrah, where he plans to to bring them, and discuss that with him. Ask him also how he plans to take care of you as a husband. Ask him about details. So if you end up speaking to a brother who at that moment isn't working, what are his plans to work? And what has he worked as in the past? Does he have a career and now he's just in between jobs? Has he never worked? You find out about his situation, his working history and things like that, keeping a job and all of those things, and determine whether you believe this is a man who will be able to take care of you and your children afterwards. And also ask him about causes of divorce and what are some things that lead to divorce nowadays, and also what he deems, because since divorce is in the hands of the husband, what he deems is a reason for divorcing a wife. What does he believe a wife has to do that would warrant divorcing her? Now, and that will show you his level of tolerance and all of that, insha'Allah ta'ala. That is the conclusion as it pertains to the questions. And although we can mention, tens and hundreds of questions, that insha'Allah will suffice in terms of questions to ask. If there are, after listening to this podcast, or any brothers or sisters have questions that they may have thought of while listening to this podcast and listening to some of the questions that were mentioned, maybe they can mention it, inshallah, in the comments, or even send an email and ask them. Or they maybe there are follow-up questions to some of the questions that were mentioned as well. They can also mention those as well in the comments, and we'll do our best to answer those questions, inshallah ta'ala, and give feedback regarding them, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. To conclude, though, when it comes to the matter of marriage, and what we find a lot of the times in terms of a marriage is failing, is lack of preparation. And so that is why this podcast was even done, this topic itself, Marriage 101 and guidelines in finding a suitable spouse. And a lot of the times this actually stems from the parents not preparing their children for marriage. And this is a very big cause of divorce. You find brothers completely ignorant of what it means to be a husband and what it means to deal with a woman, etc., in an honorable way. And likewise, a sister not having any clue what it means to be a wife and a mother, and the importance of the unity of marriage. And as we mentioned in the some of the harms of the society we live in today, and what the Muslims are involved in terms of what they watch and in terms of what they listen to, the music they're listening to and poisoning themselves with, and the movies they watch and the TV shows they watch, and them learning relationships and marriage and all of these things from these places. What it has caused is them to not even really value marriage, and even look at marriage as just any other relationship, because of the norm of dating. And as we mentioned previously, the dating scene or the dating culture, this culture, poisonous and evil culture, has caused Muslims to now, with every little thing, just divorce. Like, divorce is simply the equivalent of breaking up, and you just move on to the next boyfriend and girlfriend. And so that is how the ta'zeem, or the seeing marriage as something great and a huge achievement that needs to be cherished and needs to be worked on, and realizing that it is something that you constantly work on in marriage, and that it's not just gonna be perfect from day one, and that there is going to be bumps on the road, and realizing that these are not things that should make you divorce. Just like fights you might have with your friends, or fights you may have with your siblings, right? They don't cause you to now sever ties completely or cut them off. You work on it and you move on. That idea, obviously within what is tolerated and bearable when it comes to marriage, but that idea that marriage is something so important and huge that it should be preserved, and it's something that divorce should be something hated and should not be resorted to except in extreme cases. That has kind of died, and that has died for many reasons. One of them being the lack of preparation from the parents' side, and the other also being the culture that we live in today, that has formed the mentality and the personalities actually of the Muslims, the young adults nowadays who are getting married, in that it's just really a halal boyfriend and girlfriend situation. We were dating beforehand, and we love each other, and there's emotions there, and we got married. We had a nice, beautiful wedding. We had a nice, honeymoon trip to Morocco or Turkey and whatever the case is. And then now the reality of life hits, and no one knows how to act. And then it's whatever. It's just not working out, and divorce, as if it's and I just move on to the next one, get to know another person. So this destructive cycle needs to stop, and inshallah, with podcasts like this and educating the Muslims on where we're going wrong and what the solutions are, is something vital and crucial. Inshallah ta'ala, my advice to the parents is teach your children from young. When you see them reach the age of puberty, or even reach the age of where they may be looking to get married, that you prepare them. So the fathers, prepare your sons by teaching them what marriage takes, what it takes to be married, and what it takes to be a man of a household, what it takes to be responsible. Teach him responsibility. Teach him all of these things that he's going to need to know as a husband and as a father, and teach him about patience, and teach him about overlooking when it's permissible to overlook, and for the mothers, teach your daughters how to be a mother and how to be a wife that caters to her family, and that that her family is her world, and that is where she finds happiness, in her in her family and in her home, and not to seek it outdoors, outside of her home, and think that she has some sort of happiness there, challenging men and competing against men, and all of that, the lies that the feminist movement have told her. And so inshallah ta'ala, with that, and when communities work together and educate the future generations in this way, inshallah ta'ala, we'll be able to solve these issues that we're seeing in our communities as it pertains to divorce and failed marriages. So that concludes this episode. Inshallah ta'ala, stay tuned for more episodes on hot topics such as these, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, where we will be also telling the cold truths regarding these matters, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.